Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting episode of Secrets of the Motorway. In today's episode, we'll be starting out in Greater Manchester before making our way north towards Preston in Lancashire on the 22-mile long M61 motorway. Construction began in 1969 on the first section of the M61, which ran between junctions 1 to 6. However, they clearly weren't hanging around because by 1970, they pretty much finished the motorway with the addition of 3 further junctions. Actually, that's a lie. They sort of missed out one of the junctions, but we'll have a look at that later. The M61 starts at the Worsley braided interchange, an elaborately over-engineered interchange where the M61, the M62, the A666 brackets M and the A580 all meet. Spanning over 2.5 miles, it's one of the more complex interchanges that we've got on our motorway network, and when it was first built, it was the first to feature a dual 4-lane motorway section. It's also where we find the most number of lanes running alongside one another. At this point here, there's a total of 18 lanes for traffic. The Worsley braided interchange probably takes its name from the section where the A666 brackets M and the M61 merge in this unique crisscrossing layout. Around this section, there are several concrete box tunnels that were created instead of building overpass bridges. This was a cheaper option and certainly far less complicated to build, and I imagine when constructing the whole interchange, they had other things to worry about. Last thing before we move on, the footbridge that goes over the Worsley braided interchange is said to be so long and curved that you can't see the other end of it when walking across it. This is something I was quite keen to investigate, so let's have a quick walk and see what the score there is. I think we can confirm that that's true. I can't see the end of the bridge, can you? Yeah, hang on, I'll do a little zoom in. Yep. That confirms it. The Worsley braided interchange is so large it swallows up the first 3 junctions of the M61, so before you know it, you're pretty much arriving at junction 3, and on the approach to junction 3, you'll pass under an old railway bridge. It used to be part of the Bridgewater Collieries Railway. Imagine my surprise, coal mines in the north. The bridge is clearly large enough to allow for at least a double track, and that's confirmed when we look at an old map. It looks like there was some sort of passing loop right across the bridge. Let's stick with this old map just for a moment. A couple of other things that I noticed were that the Blackleach North Reservoir seems to no longer exist today, despite showing on a map. And just between the M61 and the A666 brackets M is this small bit of road, and I think it's a leftover of this road here. Things return to some level of normality when we get to junction 4 with this much simpler roundabout layout. When the M61 was built, it forced the realignment of the A6. It used to run along this route, but it was moved over slightly during the motorway's construction. Take a look just off Watergate Drive and you'll find some tarmac, which is a leftover piece of the original A6. Between junctions 5 and 6 is where we find a bridge/viaduct that takes the M61 over, well, nothing. When you're driving on the motorway, it's not obvious that you're crossing over a bridge, but it was put in place for a motorway connection that never arrived. If you saw last week's M58 video, we discussed how it was supposed to continue rather than terminate at the M6. It would have gone round the south side of Wigan and linked up with the M61 right here. The bridge was put in place to allow for some slip roads to pass underneath. And if we take a look at junction 5, we can see where extra space and future-proofing has been built into it as they were anticipating more connecting roads from the M58. I said earlier that they missed out a junction when constructing the M61, and indeed we're missing junction 7. Junction 7 was planned as part of a super city that never came to be. Post-war Britain saw a huge housing crisis up and down the country, and the government decided to set up various organisations that would acquire land and manage the construction of what was to be called new town developments. Over the years, this would see large areas redeveloped and quite literally new towns created. In 1970, the last of these new towns to be announced was the central Lancashire New Town. This would see Chorley, Leyland and Preston all combined into one massive super city. Open green spaces would be built on, transport links would be built everywhere, and it would create a city the likes of which had never been seen before. Perhaps not surprisingly, everyone was opposed to the idea, including Manchester City Council, who thought the whole idea was wildly extravagant. By the mid-70s, the government were having second thoughts as well and began redirecting funding to other projects. By 1985, the organisations set up in the late 40s were all wound down and all plans were cancelled, including any plans for Junction 7. Had it been built, it would have most likely have been built here, where the motorway crosses over the A673. This bridge has clearly been built to allow for the additions of more road, maybe even a motorway junction. It's a good theory. A short distance from where Junction 7 would have been is Rivington Reservoir, and is where we find Liverpool Castle. As you'll know, we're not in Liverpool, so what's this ancient ruin all about? Well, it's not an ancient ruin at all. It was built in 1912 and is actually a scale replica of the real Liverpool Castle that was built in 1237. The original Liverpool Castle was indeed situated in Liverpool, but it was demolished in 1726 and is now a shopping centre. The replica was commissioned by William Lever, founder of a company called the Lever Brothers, who would go on to become the massive corporation Unilever. The castle is actually a folly, and it was never intended to be finished. William Lever wanted it to look like a ruined castle, but even then he had intended on building a little bit more than what we see today. Sadly, Lever's death in 1925 meant all works on the castle was halted, and it's sat like this ever since. Up at Junction 8 in the M61 passes the local landmark called Botany Bay Mill. It's also known as Canal Mill. It opened in the mid-1850s, but after 100 years of operation, closed down due to a change in industrial needs and a drop in demand. It was then bought in the 1960s and converted into a vehicle repair shop, but then in the 1990s it would be converted again, this time into a visitor attraction and a shopping centre. The main attraction at Botany Bay was Puddletown Pirates, a large indoor soft play area mainly for the kids, but the mill also offered a unique selection of cafes and shops. Sadly, it all came to an end in 2019. The customer numbers dropped and the business was no longer sustainable. For a couple of years it sat abandoned, but the mill and surrounding site is undergoing extensive redevelopment. This will see the addition of 33 business units, a Macca's drive-through, and of course a few hundred luxury homes and flats. Yummy. Now look, I'm not against progress, it's something that we have to do, but what I am against is shipbuilding designs. Here's what the mill might look like after redevelopment. The phrase timeless design cannot be applied here. Junction 9 is known as the Clayton Brook Interchange, and it's where the M61 and the M65 meet, and originally the junction wasn't built. Much like Junction 7, it was being factored into the central Lancashire New Town plan, and therefore would have been built a little bit later on once they decided what they were doing. The proposed layout for the junction looked a bit like this. The idea was that the M61 would link up with the Preston Eastern Primary route, which would be built as part of the New Town plans. None of that came to fruition, except for a spur road that was built as part of the plan linking the A6 to the M61, and that created Junction 9. In 1997, the M65 would come along and mess it all up, resulting in the spur road being shifted slightly to the north to allow the motorway to come through. Which explains why today we've got this odd arrangement at Junction 9, and why there's this rather odd slip road slash motorway running parallel to the M65. This short out-of-place motorway is nicknamed the Walton Summit motorway. Because it joins up exclusively with motorways, the road needs to have motorway restrictions applied to it to prevent any non-motorway traffic from accessing motorways. And for quite a while there seemed to be some confusion as to which motorway the spur road should fall under. It seems that even the local council didn't know, with some signs showing the M61 and others showing M65. These days I believe it's been signed correctly and is now considered part of the M61, which is why it's in this video. Our last stop is at the end of the M61 where it merges with the M6. Originally there was a far more ambitious interchange plan that looked a bit like this. It's that central Lancashire New Town development plan. The idea was that the M6, M61 and M65 motorways would all merge here. But as we just saw, the M65 joins the M61 at Junction 9, meaning they obviously didn't progress with their original plan and went with the alternative that we've got today. And there we are then guys, that's all we've got time for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there's a button specifically for that. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That'll be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting episode of Secrets of the Motorway. Until then, take care, bye bye.